Good evening if you're watching live and you're somewhere in the west of the US or further west. And if you're watching later, welcome. Check out my other topics and live streams. Hello, I'm Andrew Hill. I'll be your host tonight to talk about different types of biohacking. We'll do a little bit of neurofeedback. I'll show you some live neurofeedback and we'll talk about some topics. Usually each of these nights. Tonight's topic is new habits, new year, new habits, how to get started. And generally I write a short little how-to guide, which I've linked in the show notes. And you can feel free to check those out and go read the articles about some basics on how to start with new habits or basic biohacking. I have about 20 articles there, and you can see live streams for all those topics. So if you're new to this channel, again, welcome. Please hit like and subscribe. If you want those notification of new events, hit the bell, and I will be in your YouTube notifications. So tonight I'm going to talk about habits, but the format is usually to do a little bit of neurofeedback first. We'll let people trickle in, and as people have questions, feel free to ask, because this is a sort of Ask Me Anything biohacking hangout as well as the neurofeedback and chill. So let me turn off the title and the timer. There we go. And let me set up some neurofeedback. So what I'm going to do is set up so new habits. I think we're going to do SMR training. SMR is a core frequency within the brain. It stands for sensory motor rhythm. SMR is 12 to 15 hertz, 12 to 15 cycles per second in humans. And it is used for all kinds of things, including sitting still and resisting impulsivity. It's used to suppress seizure events in the brain. It's used to stay asleep at night. So it has all kinds of names, including SMR, which is sensory motor rhythm, as well as sigma or sleep spindles at night. All very similar phenomena. And essentially, it's what your brain uses to inhibit, to steer, to correct, to sort of pull back on being automatic or reactive modes in whatever the individual tissues are. So by training up SMR or training down theta, which can work against it sometimes, you can create more control in different tissues. And so tonight I'm going to do an executive function training on the right side of my brain, the right side of one's brain, just at the back part of the frontal lobe, the precentral gyrus on the right. Its job is to supervise. It sits in the passenger seat and sort of says, hey, hold on, there's the turn, slow down, speed up. It helps supervise the actual mode of attention. On the left, we have a stabilizer that keeps you in the mode you want to be in while you're doing the thing, so you don't wander off into the bushes when you're driving, or maybe more accurately, your attention doesn't wander off when you're sitting in a boring classroom or boardroom. That's the left side, precentral gyrus, and the right side is more the supervisor. So I'm going to do some supervisory executive function training, some C4 training. Move my screen, here we go. So plan my session, and it's set up with the C4 minus A2. I'm going to do a C4 minus A1. That's the left ear, A1. And 1175, that's a fine frequency for me. So my SMR, my sensory motor rhythm, is going to be 11.75 hertz to 14.75 tonight. And I'm going to do that for 15 minutes or so, a short session. Okay, so I'm taking my headset off. I'm guessing I have some audio. I have recurrent problems with getting the audio to work properly in the live stream. So if you're already hanging out, give me a audio check, please. Let me know you can hear me as I start to move into brain training mode. And for neurofeedback, you don't have to do it with a lot of complicated equipment. Now, it does take a little bit of equipment to assess the brain. I do something called brain mapping, which is a full head cap, and then you measure the brain at rest, and you can see all kinds of interesting features when you compare that resting brain to population databases. But for neurofeedback, a lot of what you can do is simply 1 and 2 channel training. That works really, really well. And it doesn't work any less well than doing a full head of training at once. In some ways, it's simpler. I use the metaphor of doing 1 and 2 channel training as kind of like working out with kettlebells, barbells, that kind of phenomena, and doing full head, Z-score training or Loretta training is sort of like working out a very complicated Nautilus machine or high-end, Cybex machine in the gym with lots of complicated settings. It can work really well, but there's a freedom that you lose perhaps, and you also lose the simplicity of knowing what it is you're doing. And when doing brain training, that's pretty important because it can really lose in some ways the sense of what you're doing if you get too far away from the brain. So this is why I still train with a couple of channels instead of moving to full head Loretta training, even though I do QEEGs for assessments. So hey folks, hey Sonia, thanks for showing up. The sound is on, thank you, and Happy New Year to you as well. I'm gonna put some ear clips on, got some silver ear clips here, and a little bit of electrolyte paste. Is my camera focusing? I think it is. Maybe I'm blurry. Okay, we'll see. So I'm gonna take some electrode paste, and it's pretty, my camera's not focusing super well. Oh well, we'll put up with it, I think. And I just pasted up a wire. I'm gonna hang that off one of my ears. That's my left ear called A1. So I'm gonna plug that into my amplifier, a little EEG amplifier here I'm using. And red minus black creates the channel. So I'm using minus A1, so that's the black socket. And then my other ear becomes the ground. I always specify 2 locations. If you're training with me in one of my training programs, or if you are one of the clients, the clinicians that I supervise, you may be using our charting systems, and we only specify 2 locations. So I'm putting a wire on my A2, my right ear, but this is the ground wire. It doesn't really matter where the ground goes. It can go anywhere on the body pretty much. And so we only specify the subtraction, the 2 parts of the bipolar pair that actually make the channel, the C4 minus A1 in this case, C4 right-hand side minus A1. So my left and right is not being helped by my mirror image here in my streaming software, flipping everything. All right, last electrode. This is a flat one. Let's see if it focuses. I think nope, guess not. Sorry, just a little flat silver disc. For some reason, my camera is not auto-focusing quite as well tonight. Don't know. So one of the tricks about putting electrodes on your head, especially if it's bare skin, is put a little dab of paste on the location first, and that will help you stick the wire on. So that's my C4. And then I'm going to take the pasted up wire and hang it on the same spot. There we go. So Sonia, how are you this fine new year, this first week of the year? Thanks for joining us, and a few other folks are rolling in, I see. Hey guys. So if you haven't been here before, this is a pretty chill neurofeedback hangout, but also sort of biohacking AMA. So if you got questions about brains or biohacking or neurofeedback or anything else, please lay them on me, and I'll stop to answer questions periodically. All right, let me get my session running. I've got my wires on. My amplifier is lit up. Okay, let's see. Make sure you power cycle it. There we go. And now I'm going to start my Eager software. Let me try that one more time. Okay, so Eager has some pretty basic games loaded. I should get some other games going here. I keep threatening to get other games installed and demoed, but I haven't yet. Let me know if you guys, let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see lots of other games, because the Zukor games, which are driving, flying, there's a media player, the Ardea games, which include things like Lotus Pond and Potions. They're all pretty cool, and I could spend an hour or 2 just like walking through, doing a few minutes of each and showing you all the games. So if you would find that interesting, let me know. But the basic default set that the Eager software comes with without any additions is installed right now. So I think I'm going to use a real basic formation, which is a puzzle grid. You're seeing here that little light blue box below me is, right now it's blank, and my signals at the top of the screen are initializing. So there we go. So now I have brain waves. Those are live brain waves. If I If I blink or move, you can see the signal moving in semi-real time. If I clench my jaw, I'll wait till it goes beyond my head here. So if I clench my jaw, the signal should jump a lot. So that's muscle tension, EMG, not EEG. The rest of it you're picking up is mostly EEG. What I've done is I've set the software up. Eager is the software. I've set it up so that we're measuring the raw signal here at the top and filtering out 4 to 7 hertz, which is theta. When we make a lot of theta, we tend to be sort of automatic and reactive. And you can see my, can I move my head here? So my average theta is about 17.5 microvolts, kind of high, must be tired. 18 microvolts, 19, there we go. And the threshold is 23.75. What that means is I've set some little lines around the size of the theta trace. And as long as I don't exceed them, the game will run. But whenever I have bursts of theta, which is happening right now, a little red line shows up, which is the theta being rejected. And that'll stop the game from running. And then we have some beta down here, some SMR beta. Let me get some focus on the screen. We see here 11.75, that's my low beta or SMR. I'm making 11 microvolts, not too bad. And I want to make more, so I set my threshold below. And now I have to be outside those lines to get past. And you can see that puts a thin green line through the trace. And we have a fast brainwave here, a fast beta that I'm also inhibiting. So it looks pretty good. Let me just start it up. I don't think I need to scale anything. I'm just going to hit F5, which an eager will begin. Whoop, a little bit loud though. Let me turn that down. I want the beep sort of almost audible on the background of this YouTube video. My guess is that they're barely audible. So, all right, let's see some questions. Let me move my screen around here. Here we go. All right, I'm just gonna see. I think I'm gonna go over here. So Sonia has a question. Would I explain a bit if neurofeedback would be helpful for sensory processing disorder? Yeah, it should be. Almost more importantly than, will neurofeedback help is sort of the perspective on sensory things. If you look at a brain map, a QEEG, you can often see the sensory processing difficulty somebody experiences. And this happens in sensory integration. You can see a big cluster of tissue behind the right ear called the right temporoparietal junction, often cramped up pretty hard, or the tissue around it. It's a big junction box for integrating sensory and social information. Or you can see sometimes auditory processing phenomena in the brain maps as mid-temporal phenomena. And often one side and not the other is struggling. And it's kind of like driving your car with a hard plastic tire on one side. And it takes you a moment to pull your auditory tension up and start to listen. So yeah, you usually can see those phenomena in the QEEG. And neurofeedback can generally change anything we can see in the brain maps. Understanding a brain map can be a little hard. And matching features in a brain map that someone wants to work on with what they're experiencing, understanding their brain map is actually harder than understanding maps in general. If you're curious about mapping, if this sparks some interest, I'll link it below. I'll update the notes, but there's a live stream on phenotypes, endophenotypes, and I wrote a pretty good article on that one where I dig through a lot of the patterns in the brain, and some of those are sensory phenomena you can see in the EEG. And generally, you get a pretty reliable standard deviation of change in the bell curve when you train the brain using this technique. So if you had big sensory features in medial and posterior temporal lobe areas, then one would expect those are driving some of your sensory difficulties. Training them down should produce very rapid changes in a way that you can sort of use to evaluate if that was where the problem is. So the short answer is yeah. It might take a little bit of hunting and pecking and tuning to find out what works for one person. Neurofeedback often works that way. So think of this stuff as personal training more than medicine or psychology. So, but yes, I would expect a lot of change with a kid, especially with SPD, a lot of plasticity, a lot of changeability. A lot of our brains are changeable. So, you can get change. All right, so what's happening in the game right now is As my brain continues to make lower amounts of theta, well, actually, you can see the theta is now higher. It's up to 22 microvolts. But my threshold got bigger too. Now it's at 33. So as I get more tired or more excited, perhaps, my theta climbs, and the threshold climbs to match it so that it always catches the dip in theta and it doesn't reward a climbing theta. That's what the thresholding is doing. You see here my threshold adjusted to 29 microvolts now. That's what's happening. Every few seconds, the software is moving the goalposts, moving the comparisons next to where my brain is, and then waiting for my brain to stay moving in the right direction or to move in the right direction. And that's what creates the release of the gameplay. And my brain notices that as a reward, as a stimulus stream. And if only certain things happening in the brain out of a billion things are allowing stimulus past, my brain starts to notice that. And then the changing thresholds will, over several minutes, train up or train down different brain waves based on what you're allowing to move to get the outside world. So that's, in a nutshell, what neurofeedback is. Hey, Kim, welcome. How reliable are consumer amps when it comes to measuring gamma waves? If not, what's the max hertz you can measure? It's a great question. Depends a little bit about what you mean by consumer amplifiers. There's a pretty, it ramps up really rapidly, going from pretty lousy equipment to prosumer that's a little more expensive to ridiculously expensive stuff that you can still get access to. So if you're talking about using a basic, couple $100 EEG system, or a dry sensor system, you're probably not getting really great gamma. Like this system here is I could be using DC coupled active electrodes, which gets you down to low frequencies, close to zero. But this kind of bipolar passive electrode pair, even with a driven right leg and active sort of ground, this particular system, which is most of the systems are like this, will top out at around 38 hertz. Above 38 hertz, you really shouldn't believe them. And that's for pretty much all EEG you haven't spent thousands and thousands of dollars on. I've done a little bit of work with gamma using biosemi DC coupled active electrode systems. And you can get measurements up into the hundreds, but it's really hard to get a good signal even with very expensive, very high-end equipment. So don't really believe that most of the people talking about gamma that are using bipolar pairs to measure it are really getting gamma. It's not really what's happening, and they're just not that reliable. I will say, though, to challenge you a tiny bit, the reason you want to go after gamma is valid. And the reason you want to go after gamma is probably not about gamma. It's probably about the coupling of theta with other brain waves. Theta manipulation, especially alpha theta, manipulated together, will create really powerful consciousness changes. And I believe some aspects of consciousness are about the nesting of gamma around 40 hertz and theta at 4 hertz. So, you have this ability to manipulate and see theta and to create consciousness, i.e. gamma experiences, by measuring and manipulating theta. So I would encourage you really to focus on that, because it's so hard to get gamma done well, and it's worth doing if you have significant questions for which gamma needs to be the space you ask the question of. But often people think gamma is sort of like a special thing about consciousness. Gamma, it is, but gamma is also an emergent property of any local network in the cortex. So gamma is not an organized frequency all that well. It kind of emerges briefly and then goes away again, and then emerges again, and then goes away again. So it's always sort of happening, and our ability to make gamma and communicate between regions in gamma is important. And dramatic dysregulations in gamma show up in things like schizophrenia, and interesting connectivity changes show up in gamma in long-term meditators. But I would hazard a guess that your goals for asking that question have to do with consciousness, intelligence, things like that. And if so, you don't need to go after gamma. Really work on thetas and alphas to get there. And if instead I'm wrong and you're a grad student who has really deep questions about this stuff, I would encourage you to think about the cheapest used active electrode clinical system, research system you can find. It's probably going to be like a neuroscan. If I had to guess, it might be something different. It might be like a Biosemi 32. New, those are in the tens of thousands of dollars, like 20, 30, 40, but you can find them used. The problem is when you're buying used research or medical EEG, you can get in trouble because you can buy the system but then not be able to use it because the software isn't something you got access to or doesn't come with the license module you would need. So in the landscape, especially old school EEG, you got to be really careful to match your acquisition software with hardware that knows about it and vice versa. Often it's a proprietary stack you're kind of getting into. So again, short answer is consumer stuff. 38 hertz is about your top edge. And there are reasons to go after it from a clinical, from a research, from a spiritual perspective. But generally, I would encourage you to look at the other end of the spectrum, literally in this case, at the low frequencies, especially theta, to get your consciousness modifying tools, basically. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but I am getting a little bit of a training effect. I'm feeling a little bit of energy and focus and clarity. And, you know, there's no real shift. There's no trend in my in my thetas and my betas, but just the act of asking my brain to again and again and again push its theta down, bring its beta up, is creating some movement in my brain in that direction. I can feel, mix of exertion, focus, and calmness. Many protocols for me, and I think for many other people, when doing neurofeedback, as it starts to hit, so to speak, it kind of feels like you're in an exam suddenly, like you're concentrating, that style. Or when you get up and finish neurofeedback, it can feel like you're putting down effort you didn't know you were carrying, kind of like you're standing up after a competition or an exam or something. So it's a little bit odd that one's brain is working out when I'm basically ignoring what's happening and talking to you guys. I mean, I am seeing the screen here with the rooster on it. It's also, and whatever this is now, it's also on a giant TV in front of me at eye level. So I'm getting a pretty strong visual input, and I'm getting beeps whenever my brain spends half a second in range, and I'm getting visual, and beeps happening at the same time. So my brain is able to learn from this, but it's mostly an involuntary process. All right, that's enough on neurofeedback unless you have more questions on it, and then I'll jump back into those. But what I will say is, let's talk about habits a little bit. So I do have articles on this, lots on the website, and there's a bunch of live streams on different topics, and all those live streams and all those articles contain a topic-focused breakdown of brain stuff, some habits, some neurofeedback, some perspectives on how you can chase these resources and make change. So this is a deep topic, and today is not meant to exhaustively tell you how to take control of every single habit in your life. But here we are, start of the new year, and I thought it'd be great to, reflect on some of the best ways we can start to make changes. And let me draw your perspective towards this idea that we have resources in the brain. Our goals for brain performance, our suffering with our brain, let's drop that away for a second and reframe it as resources. So maybe you have ADHD, no, it's attention resources, or anxiety, no, it's stress response resources. And you can think about sort of three legs of a stool of attention, stress, and the third being sleep. So sleep regulation, executive function or attention regulation, and anxiety or stress regulation are huge factors that support other things in the brain. So you can think about resources and start thinking about, where are your goals? What is off? What is not performing how you wish? Where can you see some success or some reduction in suffering, some improvement in performance that isn't really where you want to be in one of these resources? Attention, stress, and sleep as the first. If one of those three is off, you got to fix those while you're going into fixing everything else. Sitting on top of those and using some of those resources are ones that are related, involving sensory function, social function, speed of processing, stability, which is the brain's ability to resist seizures and migraines and things. And then we have some higher level features that are one level up that include things like emotional access to language and motivation and mood and joy and effort and things like that. So all of these are sort of scaffolded out in the cortex, the brain itself. And you can look at this in a brain map and a QEEG and see how unusual features you might have. And, for example, maybe your front midline has lots and lots of beta waves. Well, one might expect that you're a little bit obsessive and tend to get stuck in your head. But we don't know. Let me stress that. With brain mapping, it's not a diagnostic landscape where we're saying, aha, this is true. It's more like we're saying, oh, look, you're unusual in this way. And often that part of the brain, these brain waves, what that could mean, what's plausible, what's often true is this. And most of the time when I'm having these conversations with folks, the next thing that they say is, oh my gosh, yes, that's me. That's exactly, yes, that's what I want to work on. Because I'm only looking at things that are generally guessable, that are in the ballpark of valid. And we also do executive function testing alongside the brain mapping, which is a valid landscape, the attention testing. So those two tools together give me the ability to walk through people's data and help them understand more about their resources. And when doing that, I do see features of stress, sleep, and attention. But you also see social, sensory, speed. You can see stability phenomena, mood, motivation. Again, not perfectly, not diagnostically precise, but you can see how unusual you are compared to the average person your age. And brain mapping and performance testing to some extent are relatively stable. If you did a QEEG today and one next week and one the week after and one the week after, they'd be the same. You'll have the same brain map over months or even years unless you're growing rapidly. Huge stability of big gross features. So you can start to think of your brain maps as representing or showing us what are called phenotypes. Patterns you have that are relatively stable and patterns that are also conserved across people. Like that front midline beta, for instance, is a very common phenomena. And in some people, it's like an OCD phenomena, and they have tics and they have obsession and they get inflexible. And for other folks, they're just a CEO. They're just high powered. It works great for them. So, don't think about brain mapping as a tool only to find problems. It's helping you explore your environment internally that matches what you kind of already know to be true. Pardon me while I clean off these electrodes so the paste doesn't dry on them. Hey, Radar Ashwood, welcome. Got a bunch of folks showing up. Hey, everyone. Well, Happy New Year. Hope you're all doing great. So as we talk about habits, the first point I made was resources. Think about which resources might be cramped up or pinched, not serving you, and go after those first. And when prioritizing, sleep, stress, and attention are the number one resources to focus on first. Don't worry about anything else if sleep, stress, and attention are not what you want them to be. And again, I have biohacking guides on every one of these topics, but for sleep, the big three are fasting before bed, allows your blood sugar to drop, allows a much larger release of growth hormone once you're asleep, and that drags you into deeper sleep. 2, get up in the morning nice and early, 7 days a week. I don't care when you go to bed. I care when you get up. Lock in that wake time nice and early. When I say early, no later than an hour after sunrise, ideally earlier than that. But an hour after sunrise is when the light starts to really change color, and the blue light that helps reset circadian rhythm in the morning, it's not very impactful in the evening, but in the morning, then it's harder to get that cue, that light cue, after about an hour after sunrise. So third bit of advice is to build in some low-key exercise. 5 minutes of walking, 5 minutes of stretching, 10 minutes of yoga, something when you first get up. Conceptualize this as a minimal viable practice, a small amount of things you can do that feel like self-care and become a habit, but that don't turn into this giant burden or time suck or complicated thing that you have to accomplish and feel a burden when you don't. So if you have to go work out and it's a lot of prep, or you're like, I got to go do my workout, too much. Get up, hit the can, brush your teeth, do 5 sun salutations, go for a walk, something, and do that before coffee and before eating and before becoming sedentary and becoming a slug on the couch. So those will all be circadian cues. Fast before bed, get up early, go for a walk. And then stress, that's a complicated one. So definitely watch my other live stream on biohacking anxiety or biohacking OCD. I have a few different ones that might be relevant for you. But stress is something that we live with, and we have to rise to a certain amount of it, and we perform better when we have a certain amount of it. The Yerkes-Dodson curve, this inverted U shape, a little bit of stress, we perform better. A lot of stress, a little better. Even more stress, we start to perform less well. So it becomes a little bit important to find that sweet spot for yourself so you can live in a resilient place and you don't feel overextended, because a lot of what many features of anxiety and stress are is really at their root a sensation that we don't have the resources to meet the current demand. We feel overextended. So think about where you are in that inverted U curve and how much stress and pressure you're taking on to perform. And think about if there's ways where you can reduce voluntary stress or unnecessary clutter, unnecessary demands, and try to really sit in that sweet spot where you feel just stressed enough. And then sleep, hugely important. Sleep's a little hard to manage for some people. Again, fasting before bed helps a lot. Oh, sorry, I already did the big three. So sleep, stress, and attention. Meditation, really huge, powerful. Neurofeedback, also very powerful. If you can't meditate, you probably need neurofeedback. But if you can meditate, you'll create change in your executive function over weeks and months by meditating. It doesn't take a lot either. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, that will create huge changes over time. And you can stack a few of my rules together and get up early in the morning, do some yoga, do 5-10 sun salutations as a meditation, and then focus on being fasted, light, ready to do yoga first thing in the morning, which means you're going to fast before bed and go to bed early. So one morning practice can anchor a whole bunch of habit and give you 2 or 3 or 4 different things to do that will support healthy habits. So you're starting to see what I think about the way we should build in habits is you find a small thing and you practice it. And in this case, the thing is stacked. So it's a bit of gentle exercise in the morning. It's a hugely stacked, rich, functional piece of behavior because it serves circadian needs, activity needs, and potentially meditation needs if you're doing a walking meditation or yoga as your morning practice. So think of that, a minimal viable practice when building habits. And when building new habits and strategies and rituals and self-care, it does take some time to build in. You can get good at it in a few days or even a few weeks, but it takes the brain about 5 weeks to take neural stem cells, progenitor cells, and differentiate them into the type of cell they're going to be while they travel to the part of the brain they want to become part of. And this is a 5-week process. And about 50% of those cells don't make it. They die off on that journey and they're resorbed by the brain tissue. And the last 50%, the other 50%, will make network connections with parts of the brain, get fed neural trophic factors, growth factors by other cells, and develop a network and a relationship and build themselves into new brain tissue. So you have that 5-week period where whatever you're doing, your cells are listening to and patterning themselves into. And that plasticity, that growth factors in the brain are dramatically enhanced by things like novelty, by things like walking, by resistance training, by meditation, by neurofeedback. So think of a 5-week window. Pick a bunch of stuff you might want to do a little inventory, layer in 1 habit or 2 habits at a time, track how well you can adhere to it, what it feels like. And then over time, substitute, try new things, but just know that for about 5 weeks, you have this ability to sort of slowly pull the direction of the system around based on that burgeoning plasticity that you've created that's paying attention to the new stuff you're doing. So give your brain time to learn the new habits and practice those habits for a few weeks. And you will start to get to the place where those habits are then supporting you. So that really is the bulk of the talk tonight, is find the big resources, figure out what you can do, what you might want to try around each of those resources, figure out what success looks like, actually give it some numbers. Oh, I'm not sleeping great. Okay, well, not sleeping great is the thing. What aspects? Is it falling asleep? Is it staying asleep? Is it waking up in the morning? Is it getting out of bed? Is it feeling rested? What is it? Is it having nightmares? Is it bedwetting? Like, what is it about your sleep that's not ideal? And what does success look like? Easier time falling asleep, staying asleep or falling back asleep at night, waking up rested, waking up ready to go. Find the criteria of success, measure what's happening, and start figuring out what you can do to play with behaviorally, habits, lifestyle, whatever, to start layering in different phenomena. And things will shift if you change sleep habits, if you meditate, if you exercise, if you change your food timing, if you add nootropics, if you add medication, if you do neurofeedback, as well as things like potentially saunas, ice baths, hyperbaric medicine. All of these things will have some impact on how you feel and how your brain works. And so, again, I encourage you to think about this in cycles of just over a month, 5 weeks or so, and start systematically going after a few things. And maybe 1 5-week cycle, you dial in some sleep habits and feel really good. In 1 5-week cycle, you go low carb, high protein, moderate fat to reset your insulin resistance or something. Maybe 1 5-week cycle, you move into building a new resistance training plan and slowly, carefully structuring out the new workouts for yourself until you have a new plan that you can continue with. So think about that time frame, and also do some investigation. I don't care if that's doing blood testing to look at your lipids, or doing the Apollo Health recode or precode program to look for those 37 factors that drive brain aging, or if it's developing some journaling and you can reflect on how you're feeling, the feeling tone of the day, or what you learned that day, a la 80s television. You can find some way of recording information. I use a chronometer, which is like a diet and fitness tracker, but I plumb a lot of stuff into it. I use my Oura Ring, my body fat scale is a smart scale. There's a few other things that I use that plumb their measurements into the chronometer dashboard, so I can pull up things like, my ketones against my body fat against my carbs, and look at some trend lines and see what has been impactful. So I have a tool coming out later this year to help you track brain interventions that I'll share with groups who listen to my podcasts and my live streams first. But it's not ready quite yet, so I'll give you a link for a discount on Chronometer or a free trial for their pro version. I'll put that in probably by tomorrow, so into the show notes below. So if you have any questions on using that chronometer, let me know. I'm happy to give you some advice on it. But generally the point is, what is measured is managed. What is measured is managed, a la Drucker. And if you start paying attention to things, even if you don't make big changes start to happen, because your awareness replaces reaction. Momentum is not great for making change. Intention is required to make change. So when you discover that you're eating a bunch of crap, or staying up too late, or not exercising, or whatever, because you're recording it day to day, it starts to matter. So I use a spreadsheet and chronometer, but I encourage you, whatever works, a note card, a simple list, whatever works for you, get in the habit of recording day to day the things you're working on and the outcomes. And then what this will do is create in you some agency. And if you need to dig in deep, come see me for a brain map. You can get discount QEEG brain maps at any of the Peak Brain offices, $250 for a whole year. Gets you unlimited access for mapping. So you can do things like get baseline maps, do caffeine maps, do Adderall maps, whatever you want to do to figure out how your brain works. And then as you layer in different interventions, your brain will change. Neurofeedback is about the fastest thing that can change your brain, in my experience, for the better at least. You can injure yourself pretty quickly. But neurofeedback will build up change to the tune of about a standard deviation every 25 sessions or so, at least for classic sort of phenotype or band training neurofeedback. And things like meditation or other big life hacks can change the brain to maybe the tune of half that rate. And medications will acutely change the brain, but when they're not on board, most medications have not left any change behind, unlike neurofeedback or other habits when you change the brain. So let's see. Any other questions here? I see we've had a bunch of folks popping in. Thank you, folks, for saying hello. And we usually run about an hour. It's a little early tonight, but I ran an early session and kept kind of a tight topic for you. I would be curious, those of you who are here now or later, if you're watching this, let me know in the comments or the chat, what is a habit you are thinking of implementing? What are you deciding? Do you have a New Year's resolution? Do you have a new thing that you're thinking about? How do I try that? Is this your first time going after meditation or keto or working out in the gym or, dialing in some nootropics, whatever it is? I'd be curious what it is you're trying as the year starts here. And I won't put you on the spot. If you come up with something later, come back and leave a note. That's fine. So I think I mentioned last time, a couple weeks ago, I did one of these right before the holidays, that I think I'm going to go to a news format at some point. But I haven't yet decided exactly how to do that. So the live streams might continue for another week or two until I refine the format. Here's a question from Radar. Thoughts on pyrrole disorder? I'm actually not familiar with what that is. It's got some name. A capitalized name probably means, unless you mean something to do with fever, but no. Pyrrolle disorder. I'll look it up for you. Pyrrole disorder. Here it is. Anxiety, stress, poor stress tolerance. An overproduction of hemoglobin metabolite, HPL. Okay, that's what it's pyluria, basically. I believe that's what bloodletting was used for hundreds of years ago, right? Maybe still leeches. I don't know a lot about it. I think with the increased iron, you're going to have agitation, anxiety, and if it gets really bad, you might have confusion. But I'm not super familiar with it. I've heard of pyluria, but I'm not really super conversant with how it might impact the brain or how you might want to treat it. Also, I'm not a treatment provider, and this is just an educational podcast, of course, anyways, or educational live stream. So it's interesting, but it's not something I have a lot of expertise in. So sorry, Radar, you've stumped the neuroscientist tonight. So good job. All right, folks. So take care of those brains. If you want to see your brain map, I'm in New York City, LA, St. Louis, Orange County, as well as New York, Stockholm. And you can do discount brain maps in one of those offices, or you can do full programs remotely anywhere in the world. So if you want to work with Peak Brain, come check us out. Again, I have some discount links, I believe, in the description for the show. And I'm here to help you understand your brain. So if you just want to come back and ask questions on live streams, I'm here for it. So until I talk to you next, take care of those brains. Have a good first part of your